Reach high, aim high, and obtain.
Okay, Dad, try it.
That is so good. I'm going to need a lot more of that. Can I have some more?
Absolutely, we'll fix you up.
Okay.
Okay, so I am going to teach you the best way to literally entertain anytime you know you're having a large group coming over. You know you need to have a meal ready. This is my go-to book, and it is A Kitchen in France, A Year of Cooking in My Farmhouse, and it's by Mimi Thoresen. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But it's specifically this recipe here. And it is roast lamb shoulder with garlic cream sauce. This is basically how it looks in their image. And you can see over here, here's the finishing of the recipe. It's literally three pages if you include the picture. But I have yet to find a lamb that has the lamb shoulder in it. However, I found you don't really have to have the lamb with the bone of the shoulder in the lamb. You can get, like I have here, a piece of lamb and it works just as good as having it. Although I will add that when you can have a lamb with the bone of the shoulder in it, it does add flavor. So I will caveat that. It does make a slight difference because of the flavors you can get from the bone and the marrow, kind of like making a broth, but this will still work. Now, the recipe here does call for a 3-pound, 1.3 kilogram bone-in lamb shoulder. This is a 5.7. You may say, whoa, big difference. It is, because I found 3 pounds does not work for my family. They all love it so much. There's never leftovers when you make this recipe. If they are a meat eater, I guarantee this thing will fly off the plates and they will go back for seconds, to the point that you better be wishing you made the bigger lamb. But the approach of this is very simple. It's salt, pepper, rubbing it all over, and she actually doesn't give any measurements. But what I have found is half the amount or a quarter of the amount of pepper to salt when you do this. But the approach is, let me get my salt here, and you want to use a quality salt, of course, when you're doing this kind of stuff. But because this is 5 pounds, you can either do 1 tablespoon, depending on, how it is, or 2 teaspoons. It just depends on really the size of your lamb and how much coverage you're going to need, because if you get a bigger lamb, obviously you need to do a bigger amount. So I'm going to do about a tablespoon of this.
This is the Himalayan?
Yes, this is the Himalayan salt, yes. But you can use salt. You just want to use a quality salt, because this is also going to be, the juices from all this is actually going to be used in the garlic cream sauce. So you want to make sure you're using quality things here. Okay, then, because I've used a tablespoon of this, I'm going to use about a teaspoon of this, because remember, 3 teaspoons equal 1 tablespoon, and you want to do either half or a quarter of the amount. I have found anytime you're talking lamb or any kind of meat, because I found otherwise I think the pepper's too overpowering, at least for me, that you can really get lost in the flavors, I think. Okay, so we'll do that. Now, the reason I'm putting in this bowl is because I want to shake it well so that I can mix it really good and not have a lack of distribution. I want even distribution of the salt and pepper in it. The other thing I'm going to be doing is also slicing little pockets into the meat so that I can get the salt and pepper really rubbed into it well. This is a prep bowl I bought at, oh look, it still has a stamp on it, Williams-Sonoma. It's stainless steel with this fabulous lid. And this is not stuff that you store stuff in, but it's stuff you can really prep in, is the best way to put it. So let me move my book over here. Get out of the mess, as they say. Now the other thing is you're gonna cut little slots all over the meat. Now what you're supposed to do is be making almost like X's or T's, but basically you're really wanting to make slots in which the salt and pepper can really dig into the meat. I'm using one of my favorite knives for doing this. I do have other knives, but you basically want one that you can really get in there, you can get a good handle on it and feel control, because you're slicing into the meat and obviously you're having to manipulate the meat just a little bit so that you can get into there. So you want something that you're gonna have a little bit more control with, which for me is this knife. Okay, and so we're just making cuts, and you wanna do this all over the meat, no matter what size you pick, but obviously you would want to adjust your recipe up based on what so you can see here I'm making the cross cut now of opposite of what I did. So I'm doing my horizontal, my verticals, because I really want to get in there so that when I put the salt in there, it literally goes into every nook and cranny as much as possible with this meat. Because this is what helps tenderize it, is what we're doing now, is we're doing that prep work to get that tenderization. Okay, and then we're gonna flip the sucker over. I know, lots of fat, but that also adds flavor, and it will fall off. You will be shocked how much you go to lift this out or to give anyone a serve, and it literally will fall apart as they lift it up to get even just a piece of serving. So this stuff, I mean, I've been making this, how long have I been making this? What, 10 years it feels like? Made this like solidly for almost a year just for my mom, because she was like, I want more. It's just so good. And if you have anybody that has difficulty with chewing or any kind of, things that they have to be careful, I found this worked really good, but obviously every person's different, but just thought I'd mention it because it literally falls apart. So it's not so hard for a person to consume or to digest, because it is so tender once you get done with this. Obviously you want your meat to not be frozen. So if you happen to have it in a frozen state, you'd want to put it in the fridge at least 3 days before you go to do this, so it has time to de-thaw in a safe way. So that way you don't have to worry about any kind of food poisoning or stuff, because then it's a slowly come to temperature. Okay, you can see there, we're just getting all those slices set up. You can see I did it all here. Let me do a quick thing there. Okay, so now let's get our salt and pepper. Now the reason I do this in the prep bowl is because I've touched the meat. I don't want to contaminate my salt and pepper. So this is a really good way of making sure everything's mixed, but not contaminating any of my initial containers that my food may be in. So I really like this. And you want to be very generous with it and get it really worked in there. Okay, and then let's rub it a little bit here and just get it worked in there. And obviously I did the side here, so I want to work it in on the side as well. But this is, even people that haven't liked lamb before, they have fallen in love with this recipe. So this is, and the best part, and this is why I'm calling it basically an entertainer's best friend, is because when you make this, the only real time spent is the prep work here that I'm doing now to get it set up. And then the other prep work is about half an hour before it's done, is taking and getting the juices and so that you can make the sauce and then put it back in. So it really provides you with the opportunity to really entertain and be a part of the family without spending the whole time in the kitchen just trying to make the meal and get it done. Obviously, I do some initial prep work when it comes to knowing I'm gonna have people coming to visit, which is the sides. But as long as I've got the sides and I've done that 2 to 3 days in advance and put them in the fridge, then I know I'm good. Now, once I've done this, the next step is to get out a Dutch oven. Now, to me, what I have found, and I have this cast iron container with the lid, and you can see here on the lid, it has these points on it. Well, what those points provide is the ability for, as the moisture builds up and hits the lid, it drips back down into the meat. So even a tangine would work for doing this. You're just basically looking at a way to make sure the meat still stays well hydrated and you have that constant moisture within the container. So if you can make sure those particular approaches are met, then your meat should be fine. Just, in my opinion, you just want to avoid anything like aluminum though, or non-stick, because it'll change the flavor. And based on my research, do your own though, it's not necessarily healthy. Now the other thing, or the next ingredient, is rosemary. So what we've got here, and the fresher the better for this particular stage, is I like to put fresh rosemary in the bottom. Whether I use dehydrated rosemary or not on the lamb, this is just my preference, is to put fresh rosemary, because it makes sure that the lamb doesn't stick to the bottom of the pot, just in case. Even though I do everything to mitigate that as much as possible, safety first, because I want my meal to come out just right. And this makes sure I have a little bit of there. And it's what they suggest in the original recipe, is to do this. Now the other thing I'm going to be doing with the lamb is, at this point, there's actually a couple different options, and I'm washing my hands for a reason right now, because I've touched the meat and I'm getting ready to get into my dehydrated from the garden rosemary. Now why I'm doing that is, one year I ran out of fresh rosemary and I went, oh my goodness. So I went into my back stock of dehydrated rosemary, and the meat turned out even better because I was using fresh rosemary. So I have this container here, and I'm using my special infinity glass, and oh my goodness, that smells as good as the day I put it in, I think. But this is fresh, well, not fresh, it's dehydrated rosemary from our garden. And what I'm going to be doing with this is actually doing similar to what I did with the salt and pepper, and rubbing it all over the lamb. Now you may say, but why? Her recipe actually says to use fresh rosemary on the bottom and on top of the lamb. But I found when I did the dehydrated rosemary like this, not completely ground up, but just fine pieces, and put it on the lamb, it made the flavor just pop even more. And I think people actually ended up eating more than they normally did of the lamb when I make it. And they were like, oh, that's the best lamb ever. So now every time I make my lamb now, I do this approach, which is have a little bit of fresh rosemary in the bottom just to make sure that the meat doesn't stick. Despite everything that I do per the instructions. It's just that little bit of safety measure for my comfortability. And then I sprinkle it with the dehydrated rosemary here, and it has just made the flavor amazingly awesome. And I just want to be generous with this as much as possible, because I want to get down into those nooks and crannies, similar to what I did with the salt and pepper, and really get it in there. But again, this is all the prep work. But once you've got this prep work out of the way, this will be awesome, because then you can relax as long as you've made your sides in advance, and you can just hang out with your family or whoever your friends is visiting and just really relax. Now see there, I've got it all covered. Now I'm purposely going to put the fat on the bottom because I want the juices to really get in here. So the next step is I'm going to put this right on top of the rosemary, but you can see here it's quite large, but that's part of how come you want to make sure you get it in there good. Now if you tend to go, let me get this little bit of rosemary in there too. Now if you tend to get one that has a shoulder in it, you obviously would need to do a different pan approach than what I'm doing here, because this size I don't have the bone in the lamb, so I don't have to worry about anything. I could just compress it how I need to for it to fit. That doesn't necessarily work depending on what you have going on. So do bear in mind the size, the shape, etc. of your lamb that you're using when you do this. Now the next step is the beginning of getting this thing into the oven. Now one thing I did do, and I forgot to mention before I did all this, is I did do per instructions, which is I preheated the oven to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, because you need to have it preheated, so once this thing goes in, it's immediately cooking. So at this stage, what you're doing is you're actually pulling out your fabulous thing called garlic, because obviously it's got garlic sauce in it. So what I have here is, depending on what you want to do approach-wise, you can either use 2 bowls like here. Or what I like to use also is, because depending on how much garlic or lamb you're doing, is the bag that the lamb came in, which for us was from Costco. And basically, as I peel these, is be able to stick the peel, that would be the best way, into the container. Now, what you're supposed to do is have 6 of these. Well, I do live up to instructions in regards to having at least 6, but I actually put the 6 in the container. The instructions say 5 in here, 6 that you use to make the sauce. But because I have to literally peel usually 40 garlic cloves to get the sauce, everyone in the family's like, we want more. My brother calls it the cheesy sauce, but this is what you need to get the sauce.
It has no cheese in it.
I know, it has no cheese in it. I was going to say that when I went to make it. But what I like to do is do a little bit of a twist at the top to get any kind of this excess that's not really stuck on it well, so that when I put it in here, it's not really flying around and then a person's having to pick through this peeling. I like to at least help them just a little bit. But the approach is you just kind of half this. And I'm just doing this gently because I don't want it to go flying. Ooh, it's got a bad piece in there. So let's take that bad piece out. We don't want that in our food. And that happens sometimes with garlic. If you see any that are green, I'm going to put that to the side because that one's bad. But what I'm going to do, because this is still good, these pieces are, is I'm just going to take these and I'm just going to spread these around because these are still good. And let me cut this one in half. And there's no need to toss them. And what you can also do, once all of this cooks, and it's so good. Now, awesome, because what you do is you actually take the, let's get rid of that bad piece. You actually take all of this, once you've gotten it in here, and you're supposed to put the cloves in here, and you're opening them up, basically, because you want it to be opened. And it helps flavor the meat, while at the same time, see here, I like to twist that off, because I don't want that getting in people's food when they go to pick it up or what have you. But what it does is you pour, she suggests olive oil. I have not liked olive oil on this meat at all. So I tend to do as quality as possible of avocado oil. Obviously you want virgin cold pressed oil. And I know that because I have a bit of a background in oils because of a company I used to work for. So you want to get as virgin and cold pressed as possible. That one had a bad one, but at least it was on the end. And the reason for that is if you don't get that virgin initial first press, most companies will use a product called hexane. And we're just going to put that whole clove in there like that, because you're looking to get that flavor in there. And actually, you can take this clove out and eat it once it's cooked. It's so freaking good. It is so good just to take these out once it's cooked and just eat the clove with the oil and the flavors of the lamb and everything on it. It is so delicious. Okay, so that's true. But anyways, what I was saying is hexane. They use a product called hexane to actually extract more oil from the product of whatever it is they're pressing. So you really want to make sure you're getting as close to virgin and first press as possible. And also realize that every time, depending on if they're not using the cold press method, obviously, that every time they press, the equipment gets hotter and hotter. So it ends up heating up the product. So some items that you can make oil out of end up being very delicate. So if you take that into consideration, you don't know what portion of that press you potentially got. So you could be getting at the end of the line where it's really hot and no nutrition versus if it was cold pressed. So let's put that in there. I'm going to wiggle that in there. Do a little jiggle. And right here. So you want to make sure that you're taking into account what type of oil, as well as how it was pressed, how it was processed, because that is also a health impact item. Okay, so we'll just continue, and I got 3 more to do here. Because see, you just want to really distribute the garlic around it to get that really good flavor. And these are so good after they've cooked it in. Sometimes we'll have people that just take the whole piece like this after it's cooked, put it in their plate, and they'll eat these little pieces like a little pod. And it's so good. I've done that myself, and it is so good. Now, what we're going to do is take our avocado oil, and we're going to be very, very generous on this, because you're wanting to coat this sucker, and I mean thoroughly coat this. Okay, and you're going to make sure you get the garlic pieces well too. Okay, so we have thoroughly coated it. Now all we have to do is put this in our preheated 300-degree oven for it to cook with the lid. This is where it's so important to have that lid, because again, you're wanting the moisture to come up, hit the lid, and drip down back into the container. So do bear in mind that when you're selecting the container you want to use. Okay. Ooh, I think we need to take out the split one. You can stop recording. Okay, there we go. Okay, now bear in mind you may or may not have to change the height of your shelves here to make sure whatever container that you ended up picking fits. And then we'll just close it. Now, it says it's supposed to cook for 5 hours, but I actually set a timer on this for 4.5. Now, the reason I do 4.5 is because the last half hour of cooking time, you're supposed to briefly take the meat out, get juice created from the meat out to make some of the sauce. You don't need all the juices, you just need a certain portion of it. And so that's how come I only do 4.5 hours. Now, once you've done that, then you put it back in. You set the timer again for the remaining half hour, while in the interim, you're making your cream sauce. So that's my strategy when I make this recipe, is even though you're cooking for 5, you want to set your timer for 4.5 so that you can do your steps. So let's set our timer for 4.5, and then we'll come back and we'll do the sauce and next steps. Okay, so the next step, that's part of the prep, is getting pieces of garlic itself, the clove, peeled to actually make the garlic sauce. Now the recipe does say that you use 3/4 a cup heavy cream, 1/3 a cup of whole milk, and 1 tablespoon, cornstarch. And then when you flip the page, and it's not actually listed as part of the ingredients, you have to flip the page for the instructions, and it says that you basically peel 10 cloves of garlic, and then you combine the garlic, the cream, the milk in a saucepan, simmer on low heat. And then when it's thickened, which usually takes 20 to 25 minutes, that's how come I said half an hour that you remain off, you turn off the heat, you whisk in the cornstarch and 1/3 a cup of the juices from the roasting pan, avoiding the fat that rises to the top, and add a pinch of salt, still whisking. And then you're supposed to return it, let it simmer about 2 more minutes, and then you're supposed to strain the sauce to remove the garlic, because you're just supposed to be infusing the garlic. I admit I do not strain my sauce. And I know you may say, oh my goodness, that is a lot of garlic. And actually, I quadruple the recipe, because my family and friends love the sauce. And even though some people are not a garlic lover per se, this sauce is spectacular. It literally, you want more, you go back for more. They love it so much. My brother keeps telling me, Crystal, send me the cheesy sauce recipe. I need the cheesy sauce. I have sent that recipe to my brother probably a dozen times now, and I finally stopped because he didn't realize there's no cheese in it. But it's the way that the consistency of the garlic sauce comes out. It's just spectacular. So what we're going to do is we're just going to break this open. Whoop, lost one. And all you're going to do is we're going to make this. Now, normally you would, like the instructions say, you would, peel these. But I found this fabulous thing. I used to do this all by hand, and I just got so frustrated. But now I got this fabulous thing, and it's supposed to peel it for me. So we'll see. Well, maybe I didn't do that one. Oh, there we go. Oh, that was so much easier. I think it was too flat for it. And then I usually have a second bowl where I have one bowl where I put my shavings from the garlic, and another bowl where I usually put the garlic itself. So that way I'm not mixing the shell with the garlic, and I've got clean garlic to work with, and I can count them easily. But basically with the instructions of my garlic system I recently got, is you're supposed to plop this in there, roll, and then the garlic plops out. That is awesome.
That is incredible.
You
could do multiple ones.
I know. I was just thinking. I was like, maybe I should try more than one. Let's give that a shot, because I have to admit, I've always had to do these 40 by hand. It's not pleasant. It's actually quite challenging because the garlic sticks to the hand. Now, under normal circumstances, you would not do probably this many garlics. Let's do 2. Let's see how that. Ooh, that did pretty good too. That one's a little bit stuck on. I probably didn't get the top very good on that one, but they both still peeled. I mean, that is phenomenal right there. I've got 4. This usually takes me forever.
Like
I usually have to recruit some family members to help me with this. It's true, I do. But the main thing that I was trying to point out, though, is that, you know, she says you strain it. And if you're not really a garlic fan, you know, feel free to strain it. But personally, I found the flavor so much better with the garlic in it. In fact, I think it's more delicious with the garlic flavor. I don't normally eat this much garlic as a standard, but this is the one recipe where I just like, let's do it, baby, because it's so awesome. It truly is. Now we are going to make the garlic cream sauce, or as my brother likes to say, the cheesy sauce, although there is no cheese, but because of the dairy, I can see why he would say cheesy sauce. So because we're doing 4 times the amount of the sauce, because of what my family likes, the cream sauce, or the garlic cream sauce, that means I have to do 4 instances of 3/4 of a cup of heavy cream. So I like to do the organic heavy whipping cream from Trader Joe's, because the basic ingredients is just organic cream, and then it has gelling gum. I don't necessarily like the gelling gum, but most of the whipping creams that I have found have had carrageenan in it, and that's usually the bad carrageenan. There's 2 versions of carrageenan. There's a good kind and then there's a bad kind. And we have a family member that actually will itch and break out if it's the bad kind. So that's 1. Here's 2. Okay, and then we need to do another 3/4, but that's how come you get more than one of these. And plus, I like the fact it is organic cream, so I don't have to worry too much about what may or may not be in it. But I preferred if they would just do, you know, heavy cream, but it's kind of hard to find that nowadays. So 2. Get this 3rd one open with a one-hander. Okay, let's make this 3. And then 1 more will give us the 4 that we need. Okay, and 4. So now I'm purposely using my big pan because this is a lot of liquid and stirring. And then of course I'm going to use our Bamex, or we'll be using our immersion blender. Okay, now I need 1/3 of a cup to do the milk. And again, we'll do that 4 times. So the heavy cream is probably part of why my brother considers this the cheesy sauce. But we'll do 4 of this. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now the next ingredient, of course, we know, and that's all the garlic that Mom and I peeled earlier today. Now the cream here, the garlic, you can see here, it's not exactly 40 cloves, but that's because some of these are quite large, as you can see here. So this could be the equivalent of 2 or 3. So that's the reason there's not a full 40, but it's the equivalent look of about 40. So what we're going to do is, typically, according to the recipe that I have, is you just take the whole clove, dump it into the sauce, and then you basically have it cook for about 20 to 25 minutes on a low simmer, because you just want to infuse it. I found it's more tasty if you put the whole clove in it and then basically use an immersion blender. But it's just personally my preference. So let's get this on the stove. And okay, so let's get the lamb out because our timer went off. It is not light. I will tell you that. Looking now, you can see it's bubbling from all the juices and the oil that have happened in the dish. So that is awesome. So now what we want to do is, remember, we need to get 3/3 cups, but because of the juices, I'm having to go down only so far because you are trying not to get the fat, but at the same time, you need to get 1/3 cup. And usually I can only get about 1/2 cup each instance of this. So you're going to have to do it a little bit slow just to make sure. So that's about 1/3. So we need to do this a little bit more. Okay, that's pretty close to there. Okay, there would be my second 1/3. This will be my third 1/3 of a cup. Okay, and then this one right here should be my last instance of it. And again, we're trying to avoid the fatty residue from the meat, but at the same time get that infusion to the oil of the fat that we had. Okay, so we got that in there. Let me put the measuring cup back down. So now what I'm also going to do, and this is something she doesn't say to do in the instruction, but this is just my personal part, is I like to take the juices and the part on top that looks a little bit dry is I like to kind of infuse it so that nothing really dries out too much. But that's just my personal preference. You don't have to do this, but I find it really adds to the meat so that nothing's really dried out when it comes time for, you know, people to come in and actually dip. And actually, you can see here, it's quite pliable even now, even though it hasn't finished the full 5-hour timing. Okay, and I think that's gotten it pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the lid on, put it back in the oven, and then we'll finish the sauce here. So let's put the lid back on. There we go. Open up the stove. Get this in there, and then we're going to set another 1/2-hour timer. Okay, so timer 30 minutes started. And now what we're going to do is we're going to stir this just a little bit. And I'm also going to get my arrowroot here because first I want to get this just a little bit mixed before I add my arrowroot. We all have our favorite little whisk, and it's this guy. It's my favorite one. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to stir this just a little bit. Get everything well blended and mixed as much as possible. It won't be fully able to be mixed simply because until I add the arrowroot, it won't all grab and come together quite yet. But you can see it comes together pretty good. You can see there's a little bit of floating oil on the top, and that's because of the oils that we added. It doesn't mix well. That's how come you have to add the thickening agent, which is either your cornstarch or in my instance, it's going to be the arrowroot. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to take it off because we did let it cook just a few. I'm going to take it off the heat because you need it off the heat before you do this. And this is so it has a little bit of time to come together. It takes a little bit of wiggling because even though these are glass on glass, it is a very, very tight seal, as you can see. So I'm going to get me some arrowroot here, and I'm purposely using my plastic measuring spoon here. There, so that's 1. I'm getting down towards the bottom of this thing. 2. 3. And now we just need 1 more. 4. Okay. So now let's stir this real quick. Very easy. Okay. And then you're going to see it's going to start changing just a hair. But the reason you have to put it back on the eye once you've done this is so that everything really comes together. And we'll do that for a few minutes. Basically, we'll wait until the timer goes off, and a little bit beforehand, what we'll do is we will use an immersion blender and mix this all together. So let me put it back on the heat. Now, because this is like a substantial eye, it's like a double eye to be able to quickly boil water, I've got this on a lower heat than what I would if I were using the back eye on this stove, for example, to do like a simmering, because you are wanting to simmer this. But I also want this done quick. So you learn these little, tricks of the trade. You put it on low, but you have a good amount of heat. So that's what, now see here how the oil, it's not so obvious that it's floating on top. That's because it's starting to come together. And that's the important part here, is you really want it to come together. And so we'll have to do this for a few, and you can see here that I have the garlic pieces in there. And that's okay, we want that. And if you get a little sprig of rosemary in there like I have, it's no big deal, because when I use my immersion blender, which is we call it Bamexing in our house because it's a Bamex immersion blender for Switzerland. And what we'll do is we'll basically use that, and you won't have any of these pieces. You won't taste it, you won't feel it, because what will happen is the sauce will actually thicken to create what my brother has coined as the cheesy sauce. But really, it's this fabulous, thick, rich garlic sauce, and it just gives so much flavor to the lamb. So I'm going to continue this, and per her instructions, it's going to be about 20 minutes. So we'll come back to this, and I'll show you how it looks when we Bamex it. Okay, you got it on?
Yes.
Okay, so you can see here, look at how thick this has gotten. And this has been just a few minutes. I've only been doing this maybe not even 10 minutes now. So you can see how thick. This is why my brother calls it cheesy sauce, because you can see it looks like a thick gelatinous cheese. But what we're going to do is we're going to turn off the flame now, because we've gotten this consistency that we want. I'm going to tap this off just to get that little bit. Now this is where I'm going to take care of that little bit of garlic. So I've got this special blade on there that's going to take care of all those pieces. I'm going to ask you back up briefly here so I can plug in. Okay. And then I'm just going to Bamex this. And you want to get all of it. And because it's so thick, I'm having to go through it just a little bit slowly, because it is extremely thick. You can hear it hitting all those little pieces.
It's not the metal it's hitting?
No.
I don't need to hold
Nope, because it's got the head around it that's preventing it, as well as the feet, from me hitting the metal. Okay, and then I usually like to come into the middle, just get those last few chunks. Okay, I'm not hearing any chunks. So now at this point, you want to use your salt, because it's going to be salting to taste as to how you want this to ultimately be flavor-wise for your guests and yourself. So you add just a little bit of salt at a time, stir it, and then you want to taste it. Obviously, because when I make these for other people, I want to be extra sanitary and conscious of the people that are going to be eating at my table. So what I have here is a couple sample spoons. So I can taste it now with just a little bit I added, and then I'll taste it. I'll see if it works, and then I got a second backup spoon here. But you can see here, another way you can tell if it's good sauce is if it coats the back of the spoon, similar to if you're making creme brulee. So, and then as the sauce cools, it'll actually get thicker. It needs a little bit more. In my case, I think it needs a lot more. Okay, one more. Okay, and let's give that a good stir. And you can see on the sides, it's our mix, so it might be good to just kind of bring this off the heat, just to make sure it's not still cooking the sauce. That's one thing I forgot to do. But I'm telling you so that you'll be good to go.
You have the flame turned off though.
Huh?
You had the flame turned
Yes, I did have the flame turned off, but if you've got an eye like this,
radio
it's
heat,
still going to have heat on it, and you don't want the bottom of the sauce to burn. And you can see here, it's getting thick again. It's getting absolutely thick again. Okay, so let's give it another taste because I want to make sure it's stirred well. Thank you, Mommy. Let's give it another taste. Okay. Oh, it's perfect. That's perfect. Now what you want to do is just make it taste like to you it's good, because if it tastes good to you, it's going to taste good to your guests, everyone. So now what we're going to do, because we've got our sauce done, is this is when you want to put it into like a nice little pouring dish to make it easy for everyone, and get a ladle or something so that it'll be easy to pour over their lamb. And then what we're going to do now, because we have, it looks like it's either 13 or 15 minutes left, is we're going to let the sauce cool here. And then what we're going to do is let the lamb finish cooking, because look at how quick that was. And that's because I shortcut the process. But again, whole cloves instead of pressing beforehand. And I think the sauce would be even better. But it's still good. Don't get me wrong, it's still fabulous. But what we'll do is we'll let the lamb finish cooking, and then I'll show you how the final dish, the meat just falls apart. You pour this on top, and then you can have a bite, and it's delicious. Okay, so it's been resting. Now see here, it does create a little bit of a film when it's not being stirred. So before I get the lamb out, because the timer finally went off, I'm going to do a quick stir just to get rid of that little bit of a crust that formed on top. And you can see here, it's quite thick now. Very much. Our cheese, here's our cheesy sauce, and you can see it's doing quite well now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out the lamb, and we will plate this, and we will have a taste, and I will show you just how tender this meat is. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal how tender it is. So, let's get this out. And it is quite heavy because, again, it's 5.7 pounds, and that's before everything else that got added in. Okay. You can see everything is just bubbling with happy goodness. Now let me show you how tender this is. This is just phenomenal. Look at that. I can just, wow. You see there? That, I mean, this just falls apart.
Okay.
I mean, absolutely. And feel free to take a clove to put it with your food.
Yes.
Because it's awesome as well. Now what we will do is we will take some sauce here.
And actually, you wouldn't think about the garlic itself being so delicious, but people actually,
everybody, yes, they do. They actually, in a sense, fight for it. I mean, you don't want to say that, but at the same time, they do. Okay, so now we're going to take some of the sauce here. Oop, if you can back up there, Mom. And we're going to drizzle this over quite generously because everyone goes crazy over the sauce too with the lamb. Okay, now what I'm going to do real quick here, I'm going to grab my fork and show you. Now, see here, this garlic, see how tender that is too? That's good. You can eat it on its own. It's very, very tender. Although I would suggest it with just a little bit of sauce because you get that that added flavor. That is so freaking good. You know what? Even though I've made this for years, it is still just practically as good as a delight
each time you make
it is. Each time it's like the first time almost. Okay. Oh God, that's good. That is simply delicious. This will make you look like a star. Now, obviously, you would want to have your sides with it. What we love to do actually is like broccoli casserole, sweet potato puff, and what's that green bean casserole? Isn't that what it is, Mom? And we like to put that on the dish with it. But I think anything would pretty much go well with this, just because. Oh my goodness, it's so good. And you'll be now. It may be cheesy sauce to my brother, but it's garlic cream sauce to us. And it is really, really, really good. Oh my God. So have fun, enjoy it, and you will be absolutely impressed. Okay, Dad, try it.
Mmm. Mmm. That is so good. Mmm. I'm going to need a lot more of that. Can I have some more?
Absolutely. We'll fix you up.
Okay.